There we go. So we're going to talk about musical clocks. I should tell you that I'm talking to you from Rochester, New York, and I'm retired from Xerox 20 years ago. And since then, and before that even, I've been collecting and restoring cylinder and disc music boxes, musical clocks, barrel organs, and the like, and find it very interesting, especially meeting all the people that is associated with that. So I want to tell you about, let me start out with one that's actually a modern clock. So let's take a look at that one. And this one came from one of my neighbors. It turns out that a guy I knew for 40, 50 years, and he passed away a few years ago. And the next Christmas, his son showed up at the front door with a Christmas present. And he had bought this clock for me, knowing what I'm interested in, as a Christmas present, but he didn't get a chance to give it to me. So we have it at our house and we enjoy it. So I thought this is the modern version of what people think mechanical clocks are. So
Greg, did that need any work?
I'm sorry?
Did that need any work, or you got it as is?
The only amounted to opening the box that it was in. And I was able to handle that okay. So it's interesting that it's mechanical and it's a clock and it's musical, except the musical part doesn't come from the part of the clock that they'll used to do for what we have. But anyway, so we have this in our family room sitting on top of the piano. And actually, I think it's probably of all our instruments, the one we hear the most because it's on all the time and it plays on the hour. And so we can listen to the music and think about our friend Jerry. Now, you notice on the piano, I took this picture shortly after Christmas. So since I had it, I thought I'd point out something else interesting. Here's another version of mechanical music. You see the 5 figures on the front of the piano. They're a Hallmark accessory, I guess, or thing you bought at Christmas time. And it's a band of Disney characters. It's all electronic, but it is mechanical. And they play in harmony. So each one of them plays the part of the actual instrument that they play, but electronically they play it all together. They play 10 different tunes. So let's hear what they do. I found out about those at an Amica meeting that we had. And several of the people at the meeting did what we did, is go out and bought some. In fact, the next meeting, we had everybody show up and bring it with them. We had 30 of them all playing at the same time. But enough for the modern stuff. Let's go back to the old kind, the typical kind of mechanical music, musical clocks. I bought this clock.
How do they coordinate with each other? The five Disney characters. How do they coordinate to play with each other? They're not connected.
It's radio. I don't know if it's Wi-Fi or if it's Bluetooth or something, but it's done. Each one of them plays 2 tunes, but those two tunes are also listed on the other ones. So they all play together, and they each play the part of the instrument that they are. So they don't all play together, just playing all the same notes. It's all 5-part harmony, so to speak. So this clock was actually a kit made in like the 1870s by somebody who liked to do fret work. You could buy a kit. Well, actually, you bought the plans. In fact, if you look at a book that's sort of stuck in the corner there, that's actually a catalog, and you can still buy the plans for this Apostle clock and build it if you have a lot of time on your hands. But we bought it at an auction up in Buffalo, and I don't know if others have had this experience, but we drove all the way up there, sat all through the auction for a couple of hours, and they finally come up with it. And the bidding went up and up, and then the guy, of course, stops and says, "So no, this is really wonderful," and so and so. Then he starts it up again, and it gets past where I'm willing to pay for it, and it looks like it's going to be the end. And my wife pokes me in the ribs and said, "We sat here for 2 hours, bid again," and so we ended up getting it. So let's hear this one. Oh, I should point out, well, this is the inside. It has a music box, and on the left side is the spring mechanism that makes the Apostles move. For some reason, 6 of the apostles were out to lunch that day. We only have 6, but there isn't room for 12 anyway, so it doesn't matter. Going on to the next one. This one, you may know that I'm interested in things made by a guy named Dufner. Bill Edgerton in particular should know, because he has a beautiful orchestrion made by Mr. Dufner in Buffalo. This clock is a flute clock, and it came from a guy who collected stuff, who lived near where Bernard Dufner lived. And this is a Dufner clock made by Bernard Dufner's uncle, I believe. What you see there actually is all newly made. All those pieces are newly made. If we go to the next one, you can see a picture of the face. And the face was created from the Utrecht Museum. The director there took a picture of another Damien Dufner clock and sent it to me, and I had it printed it out and put it on hardboard and put it in the clock. So it's a Dufner, but it's not the same Dufner. Now the next one shows a picture of the upper part of the clock, and the one in Utrecht, they all have a name, and it was called Two Girls by the Well, which is pretty obvious. But my wife has always liked Rhapsody in Blue, but she can never remember the name of it. So she always calls it It's So Peaceful in the Country. So I named this one, since it wouldn't be exactly the same. So It's Peaceful in the Country up there. And it's supposed to have 5 figures on it. And let's see, we got a picture of one of the figures, I think. Yes, there he is. I had a terrible time getting a hold of that. I hired 3 different local carvers, and they all had an interpretation of what they thought they should look like, in spite of the fact I gave them a picture of what I wanted. So I finally gave up and carved it myself and painted it, but I have never got around to painting all the other ones yet. Let's take a look at the mechanism itself. We take the face off and all, and you can see there's the wooden case behind it. All the controls on the left. In the top left, you'll see a horizontal bar. That has a mechanism where there's actually pins on the barrel that turns one of the 5 ranks of pipes on and off automatically, which is rather unusual. And of course, the big crank to wind it up, there's a huge weight inside of it. The next picture shows the barrel, which is fairly good size. It's a better part of 2 feet wide. And then, of course, down on the left side, you can see the cord hanging down where the weight is, and in the middle, the clock. And like other clocks of this sort, it plays music from the organ, and that's supposed to attract your attention so that you pay attention to what time it is when the clock gets around to striking. Let's take a look at the pipes. They're up on the top behind the top part. Those are the bass pipes. They lay horizontally in front. And you can see they're made out of new wood because those were missing along with a bunch of other ones. One more slide will show you these are the regular pipes. They're stopped pipes in the back and the open pipes are the next ones to the front. And those tubes on the right are tubes that bring the air up to the bass pipes. The next picture has whoops, go back one. Can you do that easily? Here you go. Those are a rather special kind of pipes. They're an open pipe, but the mouth of them is completely different. And I think that shows in the next picture that it's not the typical, but it basically blows air over a surface and then down into the pipe. Very delicate. And these pipes, by the way, make 1.5 inches of water, which is really, really low. And last but not least, in the front are the oboe pipes with those strange shaped resonators on the top. That was an interesting, half of them were missing. And that was a bit of a challenge, making the 3 different parts. They're shaped differently, they're sized differently, and they have to get, they're made out of the same kind of tin, like a tin pie safe is made out of, and then solder together. So the trick was to do the geometry to get the shapes all so they'd all match. Let me see, I think we got a picture of the inside of that pipe. Here you go. It has a reed in it, and that L-shaped bar moves back and forth on the reed and makes it shorter or longer. So that's how you tune it. Now, I don't have a video of this, but I do have a video of a clock that a flute clock that I restored for the Hoffman Museum. And I think if we go to the next picture, there it is. And if you click the right button, it might even play you music. And those figures raise their instruments or musicians, and then they turn left and right to play while the music is playing. Now, from this one, we could go to a much smaller one, which I saw advertised. And matter of fact, I think Eric showed me this one or told me about this one. He's here tonight, I think. And it was for sale at a house sale near Utica. And it didn't say too much about it. It didn't mention the face or anything like that. It just said parts for a flute clock. Turns out the guy that was doing this was a clock collector. And I guess he wasn't much interested in the music, but he was a clock collector. And he had, well, I should go back one. So I was interested in getting it. And there were also music boxes. So I told Nancy, why don't you go and take a look at the music boxes? And if you can get that flute clock, I'd be interested. Well, she came back and sure enough, she bought it. And it ended up costing more than I wanted to pay. But when it got time to pick it up and pay her the money, the last thing she came out was the face of this clock, which is beautifully hand painted. In fact, if we go to the next picture, I think there's a picture of it when we got it. And you'll notice the right-hand side has no drawing on it. There's about 2 or 3 inches on the right-hand side. They were just flat out missing. That's a piece of wood I added on. And you can see all the white places where the gesso underneath shows where it was cracked or broken. So I sent it down to a fella in Pennsylvania and he restored it. I think we got a picture of that too. And that's the original. The picture that was shown on the front of the clock, actually on the clock, was a photograph that I took. So I'd have something to look at during the 2 years it took him to fix it. Let's see. Oh, I can show you I think I can show you the figures on this one. There they are. It has a clock in the bottom and the barrel, like I said. Unfortunately, his idea of figures was little Boy Scouts in uniform or something like that. And they didn't really do very well. The curious thing about it is he wasn't planning apparently on restoring it. I got 2 or 3 boxes of parts. He had the wood collected and partly cut out to make a copy of this clock instead of restoring the original, which is really amazing. And if we take the figures off and that white background, you'll be able to see the pipes that are in the back. He also made those, which didn't help much because they don't work very well. But sometime when I get around to it, I've got to make 20 some odd pipes in 2 different types and see if I can get that thing working again. So that's the organ clocks. Now, a lot of the clocks, musical clocks, have music boxes in them, cylinder music boxes. So the typical one is made by a guy named, or a company named Rebishek, and the typical one plays 2 tunes. So I took a picture, there it is. And the interesting thing about this is that the comb is on what looks like backwards. Normally on a cylinder music box, the bass teeth, the long ones, are on the left. And there was some kind of a trade problem over in Central Europe and Austria, say, where they there was a rule that said if you made a musical clock or a musical novelty and you said it was from Austria, the music box had to be from Austria too. Well, makes sense. The problem was all the music boxes looked the same. So, and to keep themselves out of trouble, the Austrian makers switched the comb around the other way around. So all the ones there are reverse comb. That's what they call them, reverse comb music boxes. Now, just so you get an idea what it sounds like, the next slide is going to be of, there it is. That's one of those movements. And just to show you how much difference or how much important the case that it comes in, I'm holding it in my hand here, not touching the top of that panel. So I'm going to play it for a few seconds and then I'll put it down and you'll be able to hear the difference. One thing you should notice is how long it plays. The cylinder's only 1 inch in diameter. That one's about 4.5 inches wide, and it plays for almost a whole minute. Now that's a 2-tune music box made by that company, but they also made larger ones. And I think we got a picture of the 3-tune one. There it is. Let's see, open it up, we'll see the inside. There it is. And you notice the comb is longer and so is the cylinder. So I think we got a recording of the 3-tune box. There we go. And I actually have a 4-tune, a picture of a 4-tune music box that somebody tried to make into a musical clock. And they did it by taking a mechanism for a 4-tune cylinder box, which, by the way, is very rare. There's hardly any 4-tune ones like that. And they put that inside a box, which is not the box for a music box. And they added a clock, which isn't the right kind of clock anyways. But that's their version of a musical clock. I'm not going to play it because it plays a whole nother mood and it sort of sounds like the other one. But anyways, but that's a very, very nice clock. In fact, the person that sold it to me is in the audience tonight, if I'm correct. So let's go one step further. Now, these are all been in wooden cases, but usually they're in a clock of some sort or some other novelty. And here's one which came from the husband of the lady that sold me that music box. It's a big, I mean, that thing's 2 feet tall, all gilded decorations, really fancy. And it was hanging up on the wall, and Dick bought it at the clock site, a clock mart, and because he got there before I did. But in the course of some discussion, we were able to find a home for it over at my house. So I restored it. Now, this is the first one you're going to hear that the small, all the other ones you're going to hear are the small 2-tune Rebicek music boxes. And this one, I turned the thing over, opened up the back so you can see what's inside, which isn't too much. But there's the small music box. And now you'll be able to hear what that sounds like. Not only do these things play a long time, almost a minute apiece, but they also have really great bass. Unfortunately, I think this doesn't do justice to the bass sound because most of the speakers aren't big enough and the audio recording wasn't good enough to pick up a lot of the bass, but it really has a nice full bass. This black clock was really interesting. This is the first musical clock I got. It was at a clock meeting, in the mart at a clock meeting in Syracuse. And I walked around to look at things and I saw this clock with a bunch of others. And my wife and I each have a t-shirt that says, "I buy old music boxes," which we've had several times that's paid off. And this time, the lady that saw us says to me, "Oh, there's a music box in this clock." So we looked at the music box. Oh yeah, that's really neat. And it was a lot of money, and I don't know if I want that bad. So we walked around, and about 2 hours later, I'd sort of decided I was going to splurge and buy it, and went back, and it was gone. And oh crap! And then so I said something to the lady. Said, "Oh well, my husband's just packing up. We're going home early." I said, "Where is he?" "He's out in the parking lot." So I hightailed it out to the parking lot and bought it out of the back of his car. Got, by the way, a discount because he didn't really want to take it home. But anyways, this is the typical. Now, this is not the typical kind. This looks more like a mantle clock. You'll see the more typical kind in a minute. It didn't come with that statue on the top, but typically these did have one, and I was able to find an appropriate one, and so I put it on top of there. And if you play the next tune, you'll actually hear that one go. mean, think about this cylinder. It's an inch in diameter. That means the tune is basically 3 inches long. And you've got to have all the pins for that tune in a distance of 3 inches. It's amazing how they were able to do that. Now we're going to go on to the more typical shape, which is a portal clock. Now, portal clock, it's sort of supposed to remind you of the entrance to a city, you know, the pillars, and then you walk underneath the dome or the archway. So these, I've collected 4 of those so far. And I built this shelf to put them on over in the corner. It works out pretty well. Here's the first one. That one I got from Marty Rennig. Very nice clock. And I was so thrilled. This one really sounds lovely. It has a lot of bass. I mean, we can't do the bass too well here, but let's play the bass that goes with that one, number, which would be what one? 39. Yeah. So let's just take a quick look at each of the other 3, just so you can see what they look like. That's a nice one. It has 4 or 5, 6 pillars. Often they have a mirror in back to make it look like there's even more. And you can't see too well, but laying next to it, just to the left on the shelf, is the eagle that's supposed to go on the top. Unfortunately, I made the shelf before I got the clock, and there wasn't room for the eagle. Go one more to the right. We got one that I bought from a fellow in Newark, a guy in the clock club. And one more is one on the right. That one should look familiar to at least one person that's here tonight, because I bought it in Seattle at an auction at the Music Box Society annual meeting. Used to belong to Angelo Rulli. It had a pendulum on it that was from a modern clock, just a plain brass round thing. And that's inappropriate for this. They all have these brass cutouts. So I had to copy one of the other ones and made a copy of it to put in this clock. Let's see.
Greg,
let's
there's
go. Yep.
Greg,
there it
there's a
is.
question. Someone wants to know, do they play on the hour?
Yeah, and they, just like the other ones, they play on the hour, and they play the music first to attract your attention, and then they chime the number of the hour. So, and that's the whole point of it. So there's the pendulum. It has a outer ring, which was cast, and then the center part is cut out with a fret saw. Where am I here? Yes. Let's go. Yeah, that's the next one. I wanted to point this one out. This is a very unusual pendulum. It doesn't have that same look to it at all. It has sort of a figure in it. And if we go one more, I put something behind it so you can see a little better. It's the archer and his dog with a bow and arrow. And I bought this from the fella in Newark. It's interesting when I bought it. I went out there because he had this for sale. He was moving to Florida and he wanted to sell this clock. And he knew I was interested in reverse comb music boxes and clocks. So he invited me out there and we talked about, buying the thing. And the price he wanted was a little on the steep side. And I hemmed and hawed a bit. And he says, well, I've got this other clock. And he brings out another glass, one under a scissors clock, under a glass dome, a modern one. He said, I'll throw this one in. And then we talked some more. And by the time I left with this clock, with the scissors clock, with another skeleton clock, and a copy of the Harrison clock. So I ended up with 4 clocks for the same amount of money. And now the really neat thing about it is, that looked familiar to me. That pendulum is really unusual. And I thought that's got to be something I saw. So I went back through all the pictures I'd taken at previous music box meetings. And back in the 80s, one of the tours was of a house owned by Joe Teagarden down in Connecticut, I think it was. And I pulled out the picture, and sure enough, it's got the same pendulum. And I thought, wow, what's a coincidence? What a coincidence that is to have the same pendulum. And then I looked at some of the trim on the clock, the brass, or not the brass, but the gold painted parts up near the top. And some of those white parts that are actually carved mother of pearl. And those parts were missing on my clock, just like on his clock. And apparently, my friend in Newark had bought it from Joe Teagarden's auction after Joe passed away. And now he's sold it to me. So now I have it. So let's take a look at some more details. Well, there's this clock. That's a nice larger clock. And I think we got a recording of that one too. So I need to play that one. So you notice on each one of these, there's some very interesting detail. And it turns out that most of these things were actually pressed black brass decorations. That's, maybe 2 inches, 2.5 inches across, maybe a little bit bigger than that. But there's all sorts of decorations. You can see there's one way at the top. In fact, that one I'm going to mention, notice that one at the top, it's got a face in the center. I'll show you something about that a little bit later. But let's go to the next picture and you see some other stuff. See the decorations on the side and on the top, but also in this one, there's a window and there's a little scene that's made out of cutout pieces of paper, like you see on musical birds sometimes. The next one has pictures of a chariot and somebody riding in a chariot and a face. And then there's just little medallions on the side, all pressed out of brass. And I think it's called Dresden work because they do the same thing out of paper now. And they do some of it out of brass, but there's nothing anywhere near the detail that these. I mean, they'll find a star or a heart or some other simple figure. But how they ever made these, I mean, those were made in steel dies. And I haven't any idea how they managed to do that. Let's go another one. The big one in the corner has some nice stuff on it. That one has a oil painting in that archway in the center, surrounded by little cutouts of mother of pearl, and then the brass decorations at the top of the columns. One last one, which I think is rather neat. This one here, you can see the eagle on the top, the one that was missing off the other plaque and the other brass thing. But if you look at the face itself, you see the thing at the top below the 12, looks sort of like a mustache. That's actually hooked to the pendulum, or the thing that makes a pendulum go, and that rocks back and forth in time with the second count. And just below there on the left and right near the 10 and the 2 o'clock spaces are two figures. One of them is sharpening a blade on a sharpening wheel, and the other one is working a forge. And while that thing is chiming, those figures move and do the actions that they're supposed to do. And I saw this thing in an auction, and it was estimated at way more than I was willing to pay. So I didn't bid on it. And when it came time to sell it, it sold for less than half the estimate. And I probably should have bought it. So I got my eyes peeled for one of these animated reverse column portal clocks. Let's go to another clock. I had another problem about
Greg, what's
30.
what's the manufacture date on those clocks about?
Oh, late, mid of 1860, 70-ish, sometimes as early as 50. This clock is reminiscent of one I saw probably in the 1980s. at a national meeting. I think it was in Detroit, and it was in somebody's house. And I was so intrigued, this beautiful, that he had a beautiful regulator clock, and in the bottom was a nice music box. And I thought, oh boy, that's got to be really spectacular. So I was going to keep my eyes peeled. Maybe I could buy one of those. Well, in the time between the middle 80s and 2 or 3 years ago, I never saw one in any collection or in a book or anything. And I thought, well, that's really neat. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, I saw a clock very similar to this in an eBay auction. And I thought, oh, geez, look at that. Well, there was good news and bad news. The bad news is it was sold. And the good news, it was sold. And the reason is because I didn't have to decide whether I wanted to spend $8,000 with somebody over in England that I didn't know, and then have to pay to ship it here and take a chance on what would happen to it on the way. So I talked to the guy, and he sent me a photograph of it, a real nice photograph. And I made a copy of the photograph, pasted it on foam core, and put it up on the wall. So it looked like I had one of those clocks, and which was rather neat. And then he had a second one, and he sent him a picture of that one. So I put that one up on the wall. And then I thought, the only way I'm going to get one of these, and because I'm not paying $8,000 for one, is to make it. So I spent, I bet you a year or two looking for the clock mechanism and the music box. Well, our friend Bill Weinberg happened to have a nice 3-tune reverse comb music box. And he sold me the music box, which I took apart and restored. And then Bob School, who does governors and such, I mentioned it to him, and he said, I've got one of those movements. So he sold me the clock movement with just the plain face on it. There it is. Then I decided the way to do it is I'll have to design and build it myself. So I set about, it took me quite a while, and I set about building that thing from scratch. Let's take the next picture shows the bottom part where the music box is. The top part's got a hinge door. The bottom part has a thing that you can see the 2 pins, one on each side on that shelf. The face of that thing just slides on there and moves to the side, and that holds it on. So there's no hinges or hardware. In fact, other than the screws that hold the parts together, the mechanical parts, like hold the music box in there and hold the clock in there and holds the hinge, the rest of that clock has no fasteners. It's all glued together from scratch. It's made out of mahogany that's also 100 years old. So let's see, we got the bottom there. That's the place where I enlarged that and circled it on the graphic. And this clock works in a different way. And it took me a while to figure this out, but it doesn't play on the hour. The music box acts as an alarm. So when the thing is coming unwound, when it's almost to the end of its travel, the bump on the end of the little finial on the end of the weight pushes down that light colored plunger, which isn't really light colored, but that starts the music box, and it gives you about a half an hour to get in there and wind the clock up before it stops. Let's see, we got there it is. So now the music box is directly below there. The interesting thing about this music box, and you might be able to tell it in this one, but there's 3 tunes, which was really nice. Thank you, Bill. And some of it's in a minor key, which is sort of neat. So I'm pushing the button. neat thing about this is we do wind it up and make it go. And I bet you 80 to 90% of the time, I'm actually close enough to that thing to hear it. So I run in quick and wind it up. So it's hardly ever stopped in the 2 or 3 years I've had it. Here's a picture of the top, the finial up the top of it. By the way, remember I mentioned the brass piece that had a face on it. It was on the face of one of those other clocks. I needed something to go on the top, not in the triangular area. So I made a mold of that and made a copy and gold leafed it and stuck it on this clock. The one on the top, however, is an interesting composite. And you can see sort of what it looks like here. And if we go to the next slide, you can see how I made it. The center, the orange part, or yellow part, is actually a mold from the corner of a big picture frame that one of the neighbors had. And so that was the center part. And it's cast out of Durham's rock hard wood putty. And I made an interesting discovery. It makes great molds or things to make out of a mold, but it gets harder and harder. So the day after you make it, it stays the shape and it's fine to use. And I adjusted the carving a little to make the shape a little bit more symmetrical. And but by the time you let it dry 2 or 3 days, it's like a piece of granite, and you have to grind it off with a grinding wheel. It's terrible. I should have done all the work right the next day. But then, of course, I need those side pieces. So I had to carve those, and those are carved out of machinable wax, which is a wax that's, well, it's harder than balsa wood, but not quite as hard as poplar. But it doesn't have a grain, which is nice. And the other nice thing is that if you're not as expert a carver as some people we know here, you can make a mistake and you can just melt the wax again and do it over. So that really is very helpful for me, since I'm not the expert carver that some people are. So I carved those 4 pieces and the yellow thing and made a mold. And from that mold, I made the piece that went on the top of the clock. Then there's other parts of that clock that were also carved or molded. Let's go to the next picture, and you can see the corner pieces. Those are mounted on the door on the 45-degree bevel at the edge side of the door. And they actually enclose a brass rod that goes up and down for decoration on that corner. So they have a semicircular dent in the bottom where they fit around the brass rod. And then the outside of it is carved. And the other thing is the face of the clock, if you go to the next one, has what's called a pie crust dial. And that's that gold thing around the edge. Normally it's just brass like the inner ring is, but I rather like this carved thing. And it has this neat decorative carving that goes around the thing. It makes it a little flashier. So if the next picture shows how I made that, and you can see the corner piece is carved at the bottom. That's the machinable wax. Then you make a mold. This was a 2-part mold because it was 3-dimensional. And then you put bronzing powder inside the mold and then pour the casting liquid in it. And you end up with a piece like the one at the top. On the right, the gold thing, the blue thing is the wax. And that actually is copied from a picture frame, but I only copied a couple of inches. Then I put 2 or 3 of those together. And finally, I got enough of them together to make a whole circle, and used the mold at the top and molded the centerpiece there. And the one at the bottom is actually the part that goes at the bottom of the clock, and that's molded from another corner of that picture frame. Let's see, where are we? Oh yeah, so another one is that I thought was sort of neat, involves Marty Rennig too. It's at the top of this cabinet that's in our living room. And I think we got a better picture, a closer up picture of this. It's a musical clock under a dome, which I took off because it just had light shining off it. But you can see it's the town hall, so to speak, and the steps of the town hall. And it's on a bronze base. And the bottom of it's a wooden box with a music box in it. And it has a sectional comb movement. It's the only sectional comb movement we have. So I wanted to be able to show the sectional comb movement. So I copied the wooden part of that base, and that's what's under the clock. And then I was able to display the sectional comb thing at the bottom. Now, if you take a closer look at that, you'll be able to see there's somebody standing on the steps. Well, when I got this, it was at the New York meeting of the Music Box Society, and Marty Rennig had it on his Mart table. And I looked at it, and I went by and looked at it. I thought, oh, that's awful nice, but it's a lot of money, and there it is closer up. And so I was helping him the next day. I was helping him carry his stuff out to the car. And he says, you really ought to buy that. I was happened to be carrying this. And I said, I don't know. It's neat, but so and so. He says, don't you realize what that is? And I said, it's a fountain. That glass thing turns and makes it look like water coming out. He says, that's the town organ grinder. And if you look on the steps to the left, you'll see his organ with his dancing bear or whatever on top of it. So it's it's organ grinder theme. And that's rather nice. I would be interested in that. Well, unfortunately, we were on the way to go on a bus tour, and we didn't have time to really say much about it. He says, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. So the next morning at 8 o'clock, a couple of guys that he knew from Germany showed up at our hotel room door, handed me the clock and says, here, Marty says we should give you this. So we took it, much to amazing. And we carried it around the back of the car for the better part of a week while we were on vacation down in that neck of the woods. And when I got back, I called up Marty. I said, okay, what's the deal? And we made a deal and I bought it. It was nice. It's really nice dealing with most of the people in the Music Box Society, where you can hand somebody something that's worth thousands of dollars and not have to worry about whether it'll get paid for or what the deal will be. It always works out nicely. Anyway, so we want to let you hear this one. Now, this one is a little on the delicate side, so it was hard to make a recording of it, but you'll be able to hear it. And I think you get a closer picture of it halfway through. Notice it's got a sectional comb. The sectional comb is the teeth before they were able to make a full comb and have it work out all right. So they did 4 teeth at a time and screwed them on in sections. That's why it's called a sectional comb. And I mean, this is really early. That thing was probably made in the 1820s or somewhere around the 1820s. So if we show the next slide, you'll see that's all for the musical clocks. But I promised that there'd be some organic rewards at the end. And there's some number of people here from the Carousel Organ Society, and I haven't showed much of anything in the way of organs. So I decided I should add a couple of organs at the end. So here are 2 organs that I have, which we can play for you. One of them is a Gavioli organ. It's a really neat machine. One of the neatest things about it is the carriage it came on. This belonged, a guy bought it from an auction in Chicago. He lived out in Arizona. And when he got it, after they charge him a lot of money to ship it to him, he was not able, it's big and it's heavy and it didn't work. And he was very disappointed. And he mentioned something about a cracked barrel. And I answered him on MMD and told him the chances of getting a new barrel are like 0. And if it's not too bad, you could just leave it alone. It'll be okay. And he said, no, the other reasons I just can't deal with it. So we made a deal and I bought it from him. What he really wanted is something he could just put on the table and play, casually and change the tunes. So after the whole thing was done and it got here and I paid him, I've restored a cob organ that I had down cellar and just put it in a box and shipped it to him with a half a dozen cobs. And he was just delighted to have what he really wanted in the first place. This thing is really, really neat. It's got a solid, the rosewood, that's all rosewood. It's got fancy fretwork in the front. The black area with the brass is the name of the organ and where the company was, and it's all done in hand-cut marquetry in brass, inlaid into ebony. And on the top of that round thing is the Gavioli company logo in a brass medallion. The really neat thing about it is you see the series of white dots across the center. Those are mother of pearl buttons on the front of little dowels that go in and are attached to the stickers that make the organ play. So there's one for each note. There's 36 notes. There's one of those for each note. And as it plays, those move in and out to show you which note's playing. So let's crank that up and give you a, now this is a reed organ, by the way, not a pipe organ. So it sounds a little different than you'd expect. So the you notice that neat cart, the thing that I thought was so gorgeous. It works neat as far as the carriage go, and it looks neat, but it ain't the greatest kind of cart to have for a barrel organ because it wiggles an awful lot. So, okay, for the second one is another interesting problem that showed up at my house. Years ago, a guy named Tom Freddy, who lived in Iowa, used to come and visit once or twice a year. He'd make a tour around parts of the United States. And when he did the Northeast tour, he went from Iowa up through Chicago area and up under the lake, Lake Erie and here and into New England. And he'd end up at the car show in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And one year when he was coming by, he had this organ. Well, it was in a rough way. The marquetry was not in the greatest of shape. A lot of the banding was missing. The pipes were all, the brass was all corroded. And the case and the pipes were not very good. But anyways, he sold it to me at a good price. And it turned out to have two, well, besides the fact that it needed to be restored, two major problems. One of them was the face of the thing, the panel on the front, right above where it says Wagner and Levine. That panel, somebody had lost the original panel and they'd made a Xerox copy of one and stuck it on there. And when I tried to clean it up so it would look nicer, the second I put a solvent on it, it dissolved it. So that took care of that problem. The other problem is in the next picture. The barrel didn't have any pins in it. Apparently the barrel had been lost or damaged or something. And so it was gone. And somebody made a new barrel. I mean, that's a very nice barrel, but they didn't put any pins in it. And then I found out why. I thought, well, that wasn't the worst thing on earth. You know, we'd have to get somebody to pin the barrel or I'll have to pin it myself. Well, let me tell you, that's a bigger problem than I appreciated back in the 1980s when I got this thing. If I had any idea, I'm not so sure I would have bought it. But over the years, I thought, well, I'd fix the pipes or I'd fix the case or I worked on it now and then. But since I could never play it, my incentive wasn't that hot. And then when MIDI came out, I thought, well, you know, if I could convert this to MIDI, I could play music on the thing. But the only thing in the problem is getting somebody to arrange the music, excuse me, arrange the music for it. It's got 5 ranks of pipes and they play, there's a bass, the melody, an accompaniment, which is typical, and then there is the counter melody. So they all have to be arranged for this particular organ, like for an orchestra. And then Roger Wigan was visiting 4 or 5 years ago, and I was bemoaning the fact that it would cost a fortune to have somebody custom arrange piece of music for this thing, hundreds of dollars, I thought. And he says, well, there's people that arrange the stuff all the time, and they probably have something that would fit this organ or is very similar. They could adapt it, and then it wouldn't cost so much. And he put me in touch with someone in Europe, and sure enough, he could provide me with a variation, I guess, of the piece, some of the music that he already had done at a very reasonable price. Well, that really gave me an incentive. So in the next picture, you'll see a picture of the inside of this organ, which looks like it's got a barrel, but it isn't. That's a piece of cardboard tubing that has a picture of a barrel on it. On the left side is one of Bill Klinger's MIDI systems. By the way, that little picture, you can't see it too well, but that little picture is a picture of the store in California where this was probably bought. It was imported for use in Mexico City. So anyway, so I finished restoring it, put it all together, and I installed Klinger's MIDI system in it. So of necessity, because one of my friends who was here also tonight insisted that I should at least play this for you. Here's a recording of this Mexican organ. Well, it's not Mexican, of course. No, Wagner, it's probably a Frati or a Bacigalupo organ, playing, surprisingly enough, the clarinet polka. Now we'll add a stop. The next stop is the piccolo. And that, folks, is really the end. So if you have questions, comments, suggestions, I'm sitting here waiting.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Craig, for an excellent presentation. That was very special, and we will open up the floor. Marie asked me to remind everyone that I'll be teaching at the New England Carousel Museum in Bristol, Connecticut